Hello guys, we are at the Sungai Tekala waterfalls. Unfortunately, I'm a little bit early, but it's okay. They'll open at 8 o'clock. They're open now, so we are going in. We gotta buy a ticket. This is one of those I've switched to whatever brand videos that you have seen on YouTube. But mine will be slightly different, I would say. I'm gonna talk about my experience of using the Sony gear for about 4 to 5 months. A short-term review, yes, 4 to 5 months is a short term for me. This is gonna be a long video, so there'll be chapters. You can skip to whatever you're interested, or, well, you can watch the whole thing. I'll be very, very grateful if you do watch the entire thing. Big 6. Oh hell, it's so difficult to look good on camera, especially when you have rhino legs like me. Okay, so what Sony cameras did I get for my usage? I got an A7 Mark IV for my main body, A7C as a second body. Lenses wise, I've got the Sigma DGDN art lenses, mostly anyway. The 24mm, the 50mm and 85mm, all 1.4, and a Sigma 1628 2.8 that's filming me right now to cover the wide end. For the longer end, I'm actually using an old lens, old Canon lens adapted using the Sigma MC11 adapter. It's a Canon EF 135f2L USM, and that has to be used with the Sigma adapter, of course, and it doesn't really focus that well using the adapter. Okay, now let's talk about the elephant in the room for Sony, the AF. So the AF for the A7 Mark IV is simply quite amazing and reliable in nearly any lighting situation. Of course, the A7C is a little bit slower, but it's still equally usable. And now, I guess I'm going to go into the realm of a little bit of shit talking. Okay, the AF system for the A7 IV and A7C are both miles ahead of whatever cameras that I've used before. Now, what does that include? Okay, well, I've used a lot of Canon DSLRs through my years, ranging from the 10D to the 20D, with the 1D Mark IV, 1DS Mark I, 1DS Mark II, 1DX, and the final Canon camera I've used is actually the 5DSR, and none of them were as reliable as my Sony cameras right now. Now, that is not to say that the 1D series doesn't have very, very quick AF. The 1D Mark IV and the 1DX both had incredibly fast AF, but their AF is still quite unreliable when you talk about large aperture lenses. I had the Canon EF 50 1.2 and 85 1.2, they're both the EF lenses, and none of them worked well at f1.2, even on the 1 series bodies. For mirrorless cameras, I've used the EOS R, the Panasonic S5, Fujifilm X-H2, X-T4, as well as the Nikon Z7 II. And yes, none of them were as quick, as reliable, or as easy to use for autofocus, especially in terms of object tracking. Alright, now let's talk ergonomics. Okay, I guess I'll basically say one thing. The ergonomics of Sony cameras, only Sony engineers understand why they did what they did. The grip for the A7 Mark IV is barely acceptable. The A7C has a barely there grip, basically. And there's so many sharp edges at the camera, makes you wonder, do they actually wear gloves when they designed the camera? Let's talk about the menu system. Basically, it is horrible. Even the new menu system for the A7 Mark IV is so difficult to understand and navigate, and it's so complicated that it really takes an experienced user to use and to learn. Yeah, basically it has a very steep learning curve. Even for experienced users, I consider myself an experienced user. Basically, I set what I want to set and then use the same settings all the time. Battery life has been great so far, and the great thing about Sony cameras is that there's a very wide availability of third-party batteries and chargers. That makes it easy to find the right charger for my budget as well as usage. Now let's talk about the flash system. The flash system seems to be a bit fidgety for me, both physically and electronically or functionally. The reason is the mount itself, the new mounts for the A7C and A7 Mark IV are actually quite tight and difficult to engage. Certain times I would basically have to push the flashes or the triggers at least twice to get them in the right position. It is quite difficult to tell whether they are in the right position or not just by looking at it. Now, in terms of functionally, the Sony flashes seem to be a little bit more inconsistent compared to the Canon ET-TL2 system. Now, you may say I'm using a third-party flash, Godox flashes. But for Canon, I've been using Godox flashes for the last 2 or 3 years as well. They seem to be a lot more consistent compared to when they're used on Sony cameras. Let's talk a bit about the Sony camera app. It is just as good or bad as a Canon camera app, at least compared to the one that is used for the EOS R. I would say functional, but there are some really interesting things that they have left out. For example, when you're browsing images from a camera, it's impossible to sort according to the star rating for the images. Now that is interesting because the Sony cameras allow you to apply a star to the images, but they don't allow you to select what you want to download or what you want to see on your app. Come on, Sony, fix it. Alright, now since we are into the nitpicking territory, Sony, please add the option to format both cards at the same time. You see, in the middle of an assignment, sometimes you find a strange card full message that pops up because you've forgotten to format one of the cards. And in the middle of the assignment, you can imagine how inconvenient that can be. Alright, all in all, I think my switch to the Sony camera system has been positive so far. The cameras work very well and they do their job. Most importantly, now I no longer have to use the lenses that are available, but use the lenses that I want. Let's look at the view.